Howdy everyone, it's Sam. Welcome back to Wobble Enjoy Sports. If you're new around here, hope I can get you to consider to like the content and subscribe to the channel. But if you are a regular around these here parts, thank you very much for the continuous support. If you are a fan of the Mackay Cutters BMD team, you know that they are sitting on top of the ladder 2-0 with the best defense and the best attack in the competition after the first two weekends. How friggin' good is that? This weekend, they've got themselves a much easier task ahead of them as far as getting to a venue, just let alone that. So let's get stuck into the preview for the Mackay Cutters versus the Central Queensland Capras. Saturday, 4:15 p.m, the Mackay Cutters host the Central Queensland Capras from BB Prince Stadium in Mackay. You would suggest that even though there are no odds out for this game, that the Cutters would be favourites. And let's go into the team list news now for the Cutters. At fullback, Crystal Blackwell, Montana Best and Ebony Rathstrand-Smith are the wingers. Shelley Long and Kim Hunt are the centres. Alicia Ford, she comes in for Miss Kayla Shepherd. Kayla Shepherd representing the Queensland Sapphires in the National Women's Championship, kicking off, I believe, tomorrow and going on throughout the entire weekend as well. So good luck to Miss Shepherd. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing wrong with bringing up Alicia Ford, that's for sure, even though it is her first outing since the final round of the NRLW season last year. Tallulah Tillett is still the halfback. The forward pack is Hegarty, Barnu and Captain Manzelman. The back row, Bree Chester, and we'll get to her in a second, Tiana Rathstrand-Smith and Pani Rupapere. The interchange, Bella, Muka, Stitt and Lily Peacock. Shifting into the Capras now, at full back, the Dally M NRLW medalist from 2023, Tamika Upton. The wingers, Kate Furling and Matressa House. Lydia Durkin and Tani Leah Holt are the centres, and the halves pairing is Emanita Packy and Jessie Southwell. The forward pack, Hannah Southwell, Gemma Brennan, who is captain, and Regan Beardmore in at hooker. The back row, Tyler Phillips, Shani Upton, and Mariah Denman, or Mariah Storch if you know her from that name from a couple of years ago. The interchange, Crystal Salter, Tori Dakin, Indara McLeod, and Pania Tang in a jersey 17, and the 18th woman for both of these teams, Xanthi Topping in 18 for Mackay, and Lashika Pop in jersey number 19 for the Central Queensland Capras. These sides, Mackay Cutters and the Capras, had their first ever clash last season at BB Prince Stadium, and it was the Mackay Cutters who won that game by 8 points. But there's more history to these two sides whenever they combat each other. They played each other in the 2022 BMD Grand Final, where the North Queensland Gold Stars got that famous victory with the kick from Sarah Field, who was playing half at the time. It bounced into the lap of Shania Power, who was playing centre. A crazy end to a pretty solid grand final.
North Queensland Gold Stars. We'll see what the Mackay's replay for seconds to spare. Tilt keeps it up.
Oh my God!
Runs onto it, but doesn't put it down. Starts celebrating, which nearly gave me a heart attack.
So there is a bit of grand final history. There is grand final history between the Capras and the Cutters this weekend. As a matter of fact, 9 of the Central Queensland Capras players who are playing this weekend played in that grand final, including Tamika Upton. For the Mackay Cutters, 5 of the North Queensland Gold Stars that won that game that day will be playing in the contest this weekend. So there is residue of that 2022 BMD Premiership Grand Final. Looking into the Central Queensland Capras now, in their forward pack, besides a couple of their interchange players, excuse me, they have all been together since the year 2020. I spoke last week about the Mackay Cutters being a unit that have been together for a couple of years. They're all very familiar and committed to each other. The same can be said for the Central Queensland Capras, but unfortunately for them, their start to the season has resulted in 2 very narrow losses, going down to the Clydesdales in round 1 and going down to the runners-up in the grand final last season by 2 points last weekend in a bit of a spiteful affair, it must be said. Tamika Upton herself getting sin bin, Brianna Clark as well, and Lily Green earlier on in the match for sort of a hip drop sort of a like tackle. But Tamika Upton, she is playing this weekend. Obviously, she didn't get suspended. She was just involved in a fracas against Brianna Clark, her Queensland teammate of all people as well. For the Central Queensland Capras, their forward pack is their strength. I do think that their backline, there are outs for them. So, for example, Bree Spreadborough, she has been quite a weapon for the Central Queensland Capras over the seasons. She is one of their mainstays as well, but she is representing the Queensland Sapphires herself in the same team that Kayla Shepherd will be playing in this weekend. So hope she goes well this weekend, and that means that I think it is Miss Lydia Durkin or it is Tani Lee Holt that does come in for Miss Bree Spreadborough. And Spreadborough had herself a hell of a game last weekend. She's actually had herself a really strong first 2 weeks for the BMD Premiership this season. Going into the Newcastle Knights unit now, Tamika Upton, the Southwell sisters, Emanita, Packy, and unless if I'm forgetting one other person, and I don't think I am, there's 4 NRLW Newcastle Knights players playing for this Central Queensland Capras side, and the performances of both the Southwell sisters have lived up to expectations, even though they are 0 and 2. Jessie Southwell has ran for 100 metres in each of the first 2 games. Well, you know what we need to do, don't we? You know what the Cutters need to do this weekend to nullify Jessie Southwell, don't you? Hannah Southwell has very similar running stats as well. And Tamika Upton just continues to do her thing. While she hasn't topped the running meter count in both of the games this season, which is rare, she still has got herself well over 100, 170 run meters. I think it was in the first or second game for Tamika Upton. So the Capras are a tough team, man. I do think that backline is going to be the weakness this weekend. I don't think it's been the weakness all season long, but just with the exclusion of Bree Spreadborough and coming up against our backline, I think that we can get them. I think this is going to be an incredibly close game because this is a derby. It is Rockhampton versus Mackay. But just to reiterate the point, the forward pack for the Central Queensland Capras, they are workhorse forwards, man. A lot of them getting 8 runs for the first 2 games of the season. Tyler Phillips, for example, I think she scored a double last weekend in that game against the Seagulls. Mariah Denman topped the running count for 170 run meters for 22 runs, or 22 runs for 170 running meters plus. Well, you can lay that one down, Mariah Denman. I will up you a Lily Peacock who started from the bench and finished the game with 22 runs and 226 running meters. Lily Peacock was eating raw meat for 2 weeks before last weekend. She went off, and I can tell you firsthand because I was there at the game. Every time I looked up, whether I had a sip of coffee, sip of water, or I was just checking the NRL score in between a small little break, it was freaking Peacock who was thundering downfield. 22 runs for 226 running meters off the bench. There you go, Lily Peacock. Holy moly. The other player that needs to be mentioned for the Mackay Cutters victory that went down to Sunshine Coast this past weekend and picked up the dub, Bree Chester. Holy crap. She has had a super strong start to the BMD Premiership this season. In the first video I did for this year, I did make mention that maybe Bree Chester can improve her defense. I think there's something there. Well, bro, she's topped the tackle count 2 weeks in a row now, and she made 29 tackles for only the 1 missed on the weekend, which is very similar to her round 1 performance against Tweed. And she ran for about 15 times for over 140 running meters with a try and with an offload as well. Bree Chester, wow, like congratulations, man. Like she's found some form. And yeah, she was super crucial. And as a matter of fact, while Lily Peacock did her thing, I would say that Bree Chester was the woman of the match for the Mackay Cutters this past weekend. Bree Chester in the second row 1 week, Tiana Raffstrand-Smith the week before. We got Mackay Cutters have a super strong second row pairing. But in the back row, Pani Rupapare, she was once a Gold Star, then she became a Capra, and she was a Capra in that BMD Premiership Grand Final against the North Queensland Gold Stars as a halfback. She comes up against her old side in the Central Queensland Capras, and she's been pretty important to us with that halfback organising experience, and with the power of a forward now. She's just organising the forwards really well at the moment. She's super important with the link-up play as well. Just quietly, even though she's not playing this weekend, I thought Kayla Shepherd last weekend was in great touch. I thought she had a really nice game last weekend. But Pane Rupapare, man, it's really, to be quite brutally honest, it's the first time I've really zoned in on her game starting this season. She's very important, bro, and she's a very smart player, and she's got the strength of a forward. Emma Manselman, I thought that she had a better game last weekend compared to round one, so the trajectory is only going up for Miss Emma Manselman as well. Sarika Muka came off the bench, scored a try inside the first 5 minutes, made an instant impact. While her stats may only read 7 runs for about 70 metres or so, or 60 metres, her impact was undeniable when Sarika Muka came onto the paddock last weekend. Great player, and she's won awards in the past, and yeah, she's proving her worth every single time I see her, in my opinion. The one thing that I'll say, and it's nothing against the start of the game towards the girls, but they obviously had a rough trot. Apparently, allegedly, they had a flight delay on game day. They did not arrive at the Sunshine Coast until approximately half an hour before kickoff, or at least half the team didn't anyway. And you could sort of tell that something had sort of, I want to say triggered, that's not the right word, but sort of just tripped them out a little bit throughout the day. And the resiliency of the Mackay Cutters to, yeah, sure, they leaked a try inside the first minute, which was disappointing, but it was the Sunshine Coast Falcons for the first 10 minutes of that game, maybe the first 8 of the 10 minutes of that contest. And the Mackay Cutters, they just stayed composed, they believed in each other, and when they had their first opportunity, they made the Sunshine Coast Falcons pay. And then the Falcons still got the rub of the green, whether it be from the referee or from the bounce of the ball. Just things were going the Falcons' way. But the Cutters said, no worries, let's go again, let's go again. Their resiliency, the Mackay Cutters, to come back from a score down and to win 26-18 in the way that they did, when they missed a lot more tackles this weekend, they dropped the ball a lot more this weekend, and you can forgive that because of the scenario that greeted them or ambushed them in the morning on game day. I thought it was such a terrific performance, but with the forward pack, while the numbers don't read great, it is because the Sunshine Coast Falcons started like a house on fire with the ball in hand. Madison Hegarty and S.A. Banu only running for 3 and 5 runs each, approximately 30 or 40 running meters on average between them two. You can forgive that because of the start. You can forgive that because of what happened to them game day. But the point is, they're coming up against Gemma Brennan, who was a workhorse, Hannah Southwell too. This entire forward pack for the Central Queensland Capras, they're just country rugby league players, man. And the workhorse nature of their forward pack is their strength. We got to combat that. I'm very trusting in every single one of them. The back row for the Mackay Cutters have absolutely slayed it inside the first 2 weeks. Just the forward pack, the numbers, they didn't read well last weekend. And yes, Lily Peacock and Elle Stitt and Sarika Muka did come on and do their thing. But Hegarty and Banu take the sting out of the game this weekend and stand up and be the best forward pack in the BMD Premiership, like I friggin' know you can. And then just a quick mention to Miss Ebony Rastrand-Smith. I don't quite have the numbers in front of me, but from what I remember seeing, Ebony Rastrand-Smith ran for well over, I want to say 130 running meters last weekend. I might be shortchanging her, but I know I'm definitely not pumping up her tires too much. And I said last weekend that Ebony Rastrand-Smith, she looked like she was going to break tackles and break the line every single time that she touched the ball. And she looked very much the same this past weekend.
So just in closing, Alicia Ford plays her first game since the back end of September. She is coming up against Packy and Southwell, Jessie Southwell that is. She partners Tallulah Tillett, who she is familiar with, but it is going to be pretty interesting to see how she goes, especially defensively. You reckon that there might be a little bit of rust there for Miss Ford, but she's a very capable player. She's a very capable player. So obviously, tip of the Mackay Cutters, and I think this is going to be a really tough, close derby between the Mackay Cutters and the Central Queensland Capras. Thank you very much for the continuous support, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. Take care. Adios.